The great hall of the Galactic Concord was silent. 12 species had gathered here for 10,000 years to make decisions that shaped the stars. Today, they would make a decision that would destroy everything they had built. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood alone at the center of the hall. She was small compared to the beings around her. The Valith towered above her, their crystalline bodies catching the light like living diamonds. The Thesic clicked their mandibles nervously, their insectoid faces impossible to read. The Rethki shifted on their 4 legs, their amphibian skin glistening under the chamber lights. Elena had served as humanity's voice for 15 years. She had never felt more afraid than she did now. High Arbiter Kethvaros rose from his seat. He was ancient even by Valith standards. His crystal body had grown cloudy with age, but his voice still rang like a bell through the chamber. "The matter before us is simple," he said. "For 300 years, humans have lived among us. They came as refugees. We welcomed them as members. But now we must ask ourselves a difficult question. Have humans helped our civilization, or have they infected it?" Elena felt her heart grow cold. "The evidence is clear," Kethvaros continued. "Humans now work in every sector of our society. They run our shipping networks. They staff our hospitals. They negotiate our treaties. They teach in our schools. They have made themselves necessary. And that is precisely the problem." He turned his ancient eyes toward Elena. There was no hatred in them. That was somehow worse. He truly believed he was doing the right thing. "We have become dependent on a species that has existed for only a fraction of our history. We have allowed them to weave themselves into the fabric of our civilization so deeply that we can no longer see where they end and we begin. This is not partnership. This is contamination." Elena stepped forward. Her voice was steady, though her hands were shaking. "High Arbiter, with respect, you are making a terrible mistake. We did not force ourselves upon you. You asked us to help, and we helped. When your shipping networks became too complex, you hired human coordinators. When your hospitals needed staff who could work with multiple species, you recruited human doctors. When your diplomats could not understand each other, you brought in human mediators." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every representative. "We did not make ourselves necessary. You made us necessary, because we were willing to do the work that none of you wanted to do. We learned your languages. We adapted to your customs. We solved your problems. And now you want to punish us for being too helpful?" Kethvaros shook his head slowly. "You misunderstand, Ambassador. We do not wish to punish humanity. We wish to save ourselves. For 10,000 years, the Concord stood strong. We built wonders that spanned galaxies. We achieved peace between species that had warred for millennia. We did all of this before humans arrived. We will do it again after humans leave." The vote was called. Elena watched as the representatives made their choices. The Rethki delegate, a merchant captain named Yulan, voted against the expulsion. Her 4 hands trembled as she did so. She had worked with humans her entire life. She knew what they truly contributed. But Yulan was one of only 3. The final count was 9-3. The purity doctrine passed. Kethvaros nodded with satisfaction. "It is decided. Humanity has 1 standard year to vacate all Concord space. This is not exile. This is liberation. For both our peoples." Elena stood frozen for a long moment. Then she spoke, and her words would echo through history. "You do not understand what you are doing. You think we are your problem. But we are not your problem. We are your solution, and when we are gone, you will finally see how many problems you truly have." She turned and walked out of the chamber. She did not look back. The great exodus began within days. Millions of humans packed their lives into ships and prepared to leave worlds that had been their homes for generations. Children cried as they left behind friends of other species. Workers said goodbye to colleagues they had known for decades. Families abandoned businesses they had built with their own hands. Merchant Captain Yulan watched a human freighter depart from her station. The captain was a woman named Sarah Chen, who had managed Yulan's shipping routes for 20 years. Sarah knew every port, every customs official, every shortcut and danger in the sector. She had saved Yulan's company from bankruptcy 3 times with her quick thinking. "I am sorry," Yulan said through the communication channel. "I voted against it. I tried." Sarah's face was tired but kind. "I know you did, old friend. Take care of yourself. And when things start falling apart, remember that we tried to warn you." Yulan wanted to argue. Things would not fall apart. The Concorde had existed for 10,000 years. It would adapt, but some small part of her was not so sure. On the Valeth homeworld, Kethvaros stood on a balcony and watched the human ships rise into the sky. They looked like stars being born in reverse, climbing up into the darkness. A young Valeth aide stood beside him. "Do you think we made the right choice, High Arbiter?" Kethvaros did not hesitate. "I know we did. Humans are adaptable, clever, and hard-working. But those very qualities made them dangerous. They changed us. They made us soft. They made us forget that we are the elder races, the builders of civilization. Now we will remember who we truly are." The aide nodded, though he looked uncertain. "What will happen to the humans?" he asked. "They will survive," Kethvaros said. "They are resilient. They will find new worlds, build new lives. Perhaps one day, when they have learned to be less intrusive, we will welcome them back as visitors. But for now, the Concorde must heal. We must cut out the infection before it spreads further." He did not notice the word he used. Infection. As if humans were a disease, as if helping others was a sickness. The last human ship left Concorde space exactly 1 year after the vote. Ambassador Elena Vasquez was aboard. She stood at a window and watched the border markers fall behind. Behind her, the Concorde stretched across 1,000 star systems, trillions of beings from 12 ancient species, the greatest civilization the galaxy had ever known. She wondered how long it would take for them to realize what they had done. On the Concorde's central station, there was a celebration. The Valeth held ceremonies of purification. The Thessic hives hummed with satisfaction. Even the species that had voted against the doctrine joined in the festivities. The humans were gone. The Concorde was pure again. No one noticed the small things at first. The shipping coordinator who had been replaced by a Thessic collective. They were efficient but rigid. They could not adapt when a storm delayed a convoy. The hospital where human doctors had quietly caught diagnostic errors made by the automated systems. The errors continued, but now no one caught them. The diplomatic mission where a human attaché had smoothed over a misunderstanding between the Orani and the Velthan. The misunderstanding festered. Small things, invisible things, the kind of things that humans had fixed without anyone noticing. But the Concorde did not notice. They were too busy celebrating their purity. High Arbiter Kethvaros retired to his chambers that night feeling satisfied. He had saved his civilization from a slow corruption. History would remember him as a hero. He could not have been more wrong. The collapse had already begun. It just had not reached the surface yet. Like a crack spreading through ice, silent and deadly, the Concorde was breaking apart from the inside, and by the time they realized it, it would be far too late. 6 months had passed since the last human ship crossed the border. The celebrations were over. The speeches about purity and strength had faded. And now, slowly, terribly, the truth was beginning to show. Merchant Captain Yulan stood in her shipping office and stared at the reports on her screen. They made no sense. 3 convoys had arrived at the wrong stations this week. 2 shipments of medical supplies had been sent to mining colonies that did not need them. A cargo of rare metals had been sitting in a warehouse for a month because no one had filed the correct transit documents. Her new logistics coordinator was a Thessic named Vrix. He was brilliant. His hive mind could process thousands of calculations in seconds. He never made mathematical errors. He never forgot a schedule or a route number. But he could not solve problems. The convoy was delayed by an ion storm. Yulan explained for the 3rd time. "The original route is blocked. We need to find a new path." Vrix's mandibles clicked rapidly. The original route is the optimal route. It was calculated using 17 different variables. A new route would require recalculating all 17 variables. This process would take approximately 6 days. We do not have 6 days. The cargo is perishable. It will rot in 4 days. Then the cargo will rot. The calculations cannot be completed faster. Yulan wanted to scream. When Sarah Chen had managed her routes, she would have found a new path in minutes. She had known every captain, every portmaster, every shortcut in the sector. She had made decisions based on instinct and experience. Not just numbers. But Sarah was gone. All the humans were gone. Yulan dismissed Vrix and sat alone in her office. Her company was not the only one struggling. The entire shipping network was breaking down. Convoys arrived late or not at all. Goods piled up in warehouses while colonies went hungry. The beautiful efficiency of the Concorde's trade system was crumbling like sand, and shipping was just the beginning. On the Rethke medical station of Velos Prime, Dr. Thessan was losing his mind. He had been a physician for 40 years. He was one of the finest diagnostic specialists in the Concorde. His work had saved millions of lives, but lately, his patients kept dying. The deaths were not dramatic. They did not happen during surgery or in emergency rooms. They happened quietly, in recovery wards and clinics, from conditions that should have been caught and treated. A Thessic worker with a parasite that the scanners missed. An Orani diplomat whose medication interacted badly with her biology. A Valeth child whose crystal growth was slightly abnormal in a way that no one noticed. Small things. Invisible things. Dr. Thessan reviewed the cases again and again. The automated diagnostic systems were working perfectly. The medical protocols were being followed precisely. Every procedure was documented and approved. So why were people dying? He found the answer in an old file. A performance review from 2 years ago for a human nurse named James Okonkwo. James had worked in the diagnostic center for 15 years. His official job was to assist with patient intake. But his performance review told a different story. Nurse Okonkwo consistently provides valuable secondary observations during diagnostic procedures. He has identified 17 cases of misdiagnosis by automated systems over the past year. His suggestions regarding treatment modifications have improved outcomes for cross-species patients by approximately 12%. 17 misdiagnoses caught, in 1 year, by one human nurse. Dr. Thessan checked the current year's records. Without James Okonkwo, the misdiagnosis rate had increased by almost 20%. Patients were being treated for conditions they did not have. Real problems were being ignored. The machines were working perfectly. But the machines could not see what James had seen. They could not notice when a patient's eyes looked wrong, when their voice sounded tired, when their body language suggested pain they were not reporting. Humans could see those things. Humans paid attention to the small details that machines ignored, and now the humans were gone. In the great halls of the Concorde, the diplomatic corps was falling apart. Ambassador Veleth of the Orani stood across the table from Minister Cross of the Velthan. They had been negotiating a simple trade agreement for 3 weeks. It should have taken 2 days. Your terms are unacceptable, Veleth said. His fur bristled with anger. You demand too much and offer too little. Our terms are fair, Cross replied. Her scales had turned the dark blue of offense. Your people simply refuse to see reason. Reason? You speak of reason while you try to steal our resources? Steal? We are offering a legitimate exchange. The argument grew louder. Voices rose. Old insults were thrown. Within minutes, the negotiation had collapsed entirely. Veleth stormed out of the chamber. Cross returned to her ship and recommended that the Velthan Council prepare for possible conflict. In the observation room, a young aide watched with confusion. I do not understand, she said to her supervisor. The terms were nearly identical to the last agreement between our peoples. Why did the negotiation fail? Her supervisor was old enough to remember how things used to work. Because there was no human in the room, she said quietly. What do humans have to do with trade agreements? Nothing official. But they understood something we do not. They could see both sides of an argument at the same time. When Veleth became angry, a human mediator would have calmed him with words that made him feel heard. When Cross became defensive, they would have found a way to make her feel respected. Humans knew how to make everyone feel like they were winning. That sounds like manipulation. No, it was empathy. The ability to understand how someone else is feeling, even when they are nothing like you. Humans were very good at empathy. We are not. The aide did not fully understand. But she would. Everyone would. Eventually, High Arbiter Kethvaros received reports every day. Shipping delays, medical errors, diplomatic failures, small problems, all of them. Nothing that threatened the Concorde directly. He dismissed them as adjustment difficulties. The Concorde was learning to function without humans. There would be some discomfort during the transition. But the elder races had built civilization before humans existed. They would rebuild now. His advisors were not so confident. High Arbiter, the trade deficit has increased by 40%, one reported. Several colony worlds are experiencing food shortages. Temporary disruptions. The shipping networks will adapt. The Rethke Medical Council has reported a significant increase in patient mortality. They are requesting emergency assistance. The Rethki are capable physicians. They do not need human assistance. The Orani ambassador has recalled his delegation. He claims the Velthan insulted his people's honor. There is talk of military action. Kethvaros paused at that. Military action between Concord members was unthinkable. The peace had lasted for 4,000 years. Speak to both parties, he ordered. Remind them of their obligations to the Concord. We have tried, High Arbiter. Neither side will listen. They are too angry. Kethvaros waved the advisor away. He sat alone in his chamber and tried to believe that everything was fine. But late at night, when no one could see, he found himself thinking about Ambassador Vasquez's final words. You do not understand what you are doing. We are not your problem. We are your solution. He had dismissed her warning as desperation, the words of a species that did not want to leave. Now, in the darkness, he wondered if she had been right. The first cracks were spreading. The invisible threads that had held the Concord together were snapping one by one, and no one knew how to repair them, because the only people who understood those threads were gone. In the human exile fleet, far beyond the Concord's borders, Ambassador Elena Vasquez received her own reports. She read about the shipping failures, the medical errors, the diplomatic breakdowns. She did not feel satisfaction. She felt only sadness. They are already falling apart, her aide observed. Faster than we expected. Elena nodded. We tried to warn them. We tried to explain that we were not just workers. We were the bridge between their differences. We were the ones who made their systems function, but they could not see it. They only saw us as outsiders. What do we do now? Elena looked out at the stars. Somewhere behind them, a civilization of trillions was beginning to die. We wait, she said. We build our own future. And when they finally understand what they have done, we decide whether they deserve our help. It would not be long now. The cracks were spreading, and soon, they would become chasms. 18 months after the expulsion, the cracks became chasms. On the trading world of Nexus Prime, the currency markets collapsed in a single afternoon. The cred, which had been stable for 6,000 years, lost half its value in 4 hours. Merchants who had been wealthy at breakfast were ruined by dinner. Banks failed. Businesses closed. Riots broke out in the streets. High Arbiter Kethvaros demanded an explanation. His economic advisors could not give him one. The trading algorithms are functioning correctly, they insisted. Every calculation is precise. Every transaction is recorded. There is no error in the system. Then why did the markets collapse? The advisors looked at each other nervously. Finally, one spoke. The algorithms were designed by the Valith. They are perfect mathematical models. But markets are not purely mathematical. They are influenced by fear, hope, rumor, and instinct. They require constant adjustment to account for factors that cannot be calculated. Who made those adjustments before? The advisor's voice was barely a whisper. The human economists. Kethvaros said nothing. He dismissed his advisors and sat alone with the truth he could no longer deny. The humans had not simply worked within conquered systems. They had made those systems work. They had filled the gaps that no one else could see. They had balanced equations that were never meant to balance. They had held together a civilization that was far more fragile than anyone had realized. And now they were gone. The economic collapse was only the beginning. On the Thessic homeworld, the great hive cities fell silent. The insectoid species had built their entire society around perfect organization. Every worker knew their role. Every task was completed with mechanical precision. But the supply chains that fed those cities had broken down completely. Ships arrived with wrong cargo, or did not arrive at all. Manufacturing plants closed because they could not get raw materials. Workers who had never known hunger were starving in the streets. The Thessic queen called an emergency council. Her advisors brought her reports of disaster after disaster. 40% of our workforce is unemployed. Food reserves will last 3 more weeks. Medical supplies are critically low. How did this happen? The queen demanded. We are the most organized species in the Concord. Our systems are flawless. Our systems are flawless, Majesty. But our systems were designed to function within a larger network. That network was coordinated by human logistics specialists. Without them, our flawless systems cannot connect to other flawless systems. Each piece works perfectly, but the pieces no longer fit together. The queen understood. The Thessic had always believed that perfection was enough. They had never realized that perfection was useless without adaptation, and adaptation was something humans had provided. On the great research station of Kelthos, the scientists had stopped working. For centuries, Kelthos had been the center of Concord innovation. Breakthroughs that changed civilizations had been born in its laboratories. Species from across the galaxy had sent their brightest minds to study there. Now the laboratories were empty. The brightest minds sat idle. And no one could explain why. Dr. Villara, a Rethke physicist, tried to describe the problem to a government inspector. "We have not lost any knowledge," she said. "Our theoretical work is as strong as ever." The Valith continue to develop brilliant mathematical frameworks. The Thesic engineers can build anything from a blueprint. We have all the pieces of a functioning research institution. Then what is the problem? The pieces do not connect. The Valith create theories, but they cannot explain them to the engineers. The engineers can build prototypes, but they cannot test them properly. Each species speaks their own scientific language. We cannot translate for each other. Who translated before? Dr. Villara laughed bitterly. You know the answer. The human research assistants. They were not the smartest scientists. They were not the best engineers, but they understood everyone. They could take a Valith equation and explain it to a Thesic builder in terms the builder could use. They could see connections between fields that we could not see. They were the bridge between our minds. The inspector left without answers. There were no answers to give. The political situation was even worse. The Orani and Velthan had been close to war for months. Now they were actively fighting. Border skirmishes had escalated into full battles. Ships burned in space. Soldiers died on disputed colonies. It was the first military conflict between conquered members in 4,000 years. Other species tried to mediate. They failed. Without human diplomats to translate not just words but intentions, every negotiation collapsed into misunderstanding and anger. The Orani believed the Velthan were arrogant and dismissive. The Velthan believed the Orani were emotional and irrational. Neither could see the other's perspective. Neither wanted to try, and so they killed each other instead. On the Valith homeworld, Kethvaros received a report that froze his crystal blood. The Valith were dying. Their crystalline biology required trace elements that were rare in nature. For centuries, they had relied on synthetic versions of these elements, produced by a process that human chemists had helped develop. But the human chemists were gone, and without them, no one could maintain the synthesis process. The equipment was failing. The supplies were running out. Valith children were being born with defects. Valith elders were crumbling into dust. The birth rate had dropped to almost zero. The species that had founded the Concord, that had led it for 10,000 years, was facing extinction. Kethvaros stood on his balcony and looked up at the stars. He remembered standing here 18 months ago, watching the human ships leave. He had felt so certain then. So righteous. Now he felt only despair. A young aide approached nervously. "High Arbiter, the Council is asking for your guidance. What should we do?" Kethvaros did not answer immediately. What could he say? That he had been wrong? That his purity doctrine had doomed them all? That his hatred of human influence had blinded him to human value? "Find the humans," he said finally. "Send a delegation to their exile fleet. Tell them, we need to talk. High Arbiter, we do not know where the humans went. They left Concord space and disappeared. Then search for them. Use every resource we have left. Find them before it is too late." The aide hurried away. Kethvaros remained on his balcony, alone with his guilt. Far beyond the Concord's borders, Merchant Captain Yulan had already found the humans. She had spent months searching. Her company was ruined. Her fortune was gone. She had nothing left but her ship and her determination. When she finally located the human exile fleet, she expected to find refugees struggling to survive. Instead, she found a civilization being born. The humans had built new stations in a distant nebula. They had established trade routes with species outside the Concord. They had created schools, hospitals, governments, and industries. In 18 months, they had accomplished what had taken the Concord millennia. Ambassador Elena Vasquez, now president of the Human Confederacy, agreed to meet with Yulan privately. "I am not here officially," Yulan explained. "My government did not send me, but I needed to see for myself. I needed to understand." Elena nodded. "What do you want to understand? How did you do this?" How did you build so much so quickly? Elena smiled sadly. We have always been builders, Yulan. We have always been adapters. When we came to the Concord, we adapted to you. We learned your systems, your languages, your customs. We became whatever you needed us to be. But that was not our true nature. That was us fitting into your world. She gestured at the bustling station around them. This is us building our own world. This is what we can do when we are not trying to make someone else's civilization function. We are not better than the elder races. We are not smarter or stronger. But we are different. We can connect. We can adapt. We can see bridges where others see walls. Yulan felt tears forming in her strange amphibian eyes. The Concord is falling apart. Millions are dying. The Valeth themselves are going extinct. Please, I am begging you. Help us. Elena's face showed no triumph, only sadness. You cast us out, Yulan. You called us a contamination. You said your civilization would be purer without us. Why should we return to people who did not want us? Yulan had no answer. She could only bow her head in shame. I do not know, she whispered. But I know that without you, we will die. All of us. The whole Concord will fall. And billions of innocent people will pay for the sins of their leaders. Elena was silent for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was heavy with the weight of impossible choices. Go home, Yulan. Tell your people what you have seen. Tell them the humans are alive and thriving. And tell them that when they are ready to truly ask for help, we will listen. When they are ready, they are not ready yet. They are still looking for someone to blame. They are still hoping to solve this without us. When they finally accept that they were wrong, when they come to us not as superiors asking servants to return, but as equals asking neighbors for help, then we will talk. Yulan nodded slowly. She understood. The Concord was dying, but it had not yet learned its lesson. And until it did, the humans would wait. The cascade continued. The collapse accelerated, and the reckoning drew ever closer. 3 years after the expulsion, the Galactic Concord no longer existed. Oh, the name remained. The council chambers still stood. Representatives still gathered to speak and argue. But the great civilization that had united 12 species for 10,000 years was dead. Only its corpse remained, twitching with the memory of life. 7 species had formally withdrawn. The Orani and Velthan were still at war, their conflict spreading to neutral worlds. The Thessic hive cities had sealed themselves away, focusing only on their own survival. The great research stations were dark. The trade routes were silent. Billions had died, not in dramatic battles or spectacular disasters, but quietly, invisibly, the way civilizations truly end. They died of hunger when food shipments stopped arriving. They died of diseases that should have been cured. They died in small conflicts that should have been resolved with words. They died because the invisible systems that had kept them alive had broken down completely. And on the Valeth homeworld, the founders of the Concord were counting their final days. High Arbiter Kethvaros was no longer High Arbiter. He had resigned in disgrace a year ago, when his own people finally turned against him. The purity doctrine that he had championed was now known by a different name, the death sentence. But Kethvaros was still alive, and he still had one duty left to perform. The delegation that crossed the border into human space was small. 3 ships, carrying representatives from the 5 species that still acknowledged the Concord's authority. Kethvaros led them, though he no longer had any official title. It took them weeks to find the human confederacy. The humans had built their new home far from Concord space, in a nebula that the elder races had never bothered to explore. When the Concord ships finally arrived, they found something that shattered their remaining pride. The humans were thriving. New stations orbited strange stars. Trade ships moved between colonies that had not existed 3 years ago. Schools and hospitals and factories hummed with activity. The refugees who had been cast out with nothing had built a civilization that was already larger than some Concord members had ever achieved, and they had done it in 3 years. Kethvaros looked at the view screen and felt his ancient heart break. His people had taken millennia to build what the humans had created in months. His civilization was dying, and theirs was just being born. They will not help us, whispered one of the delegates. Why would they? We threw them away like garbage. We told them they were a disease. We celebrated when they left. We must try, Kethvaros said. We have no other choice. President Elena Vasquez received the delegation in a simple conference room. There were no grand halls, no elevated thrones, no symbols of power, just a table, some chairs, and the woman who had once begged the Concord to see reason. She looked older now, tired, but her eyes were still sharp, and her voice was still steady. "High Arbiter Kethvaros," she said. "I did not expect to see you again." Kethvaros walked forward slowly. His crystalline body was clouded and cracked with age and grief. When he reached the center of the room, he did something that no Valeth had done in 10,000 years. He knelt. "I am no longer High Arbiter," he said. "I am nothing. My people are dying. My civilization is dust, and I am the one who destroyed it. I come to you not as a leader, but as a beggar. I come to ask for mercy that I do not deserve." The room was silent. The other delegates watched in shock. The Valeth had always been the proudest of the elder races. To see one of their greatest leaders on his knees before a human was almost impossible to believe. Elena did not speak immediately. She let the silence stretch, let Kethvaros feel the weight of his position. Then she said, "Stand up." Kethvaros looked up at her with confusion. "Stand up," Elena repeated. "I will not negotiate with someone on their knees. That is not how humans do things." Slowly, painfully, Kethvaros rose to his feet. His old joints crackled and groaned. Elena walked around the table to face him directly. She was so much smaller than him, this fragile creature of flesh and bone. And yet, somehow, she seemed like the larger one. "You called us a contamination," she said. "A corruption. You said your civilization would be purer without us. Tell me, Kethvaros, look at your pure civilization now. Look at what your purity has cost. Was it worth it?" "No." His voice cracked. "No, it was not worth it. I was wrong. I was so wrong. I thought I was protecting my people. I thought humans were a threat to our identity, to our independence. I did not see the truth." "What truth?" "That we were already dependent on each other. All the species of the Concord. We needed each other to survive. But we could not work together. We could not understand each other. We could not see past our differences. Humans could. Humans were the ones who remembered that different does not mean lesser. Humans were the ones willing to learn every language, adapt to every custom, solve every problem that was not theirs, because they understood that our problems were their problems too." He paused, gathering his strength. "We did not push out a contamination. We pushed out our heart. And now we are dying without it." Elena nodded slowly. "Yes, you are. Will you help us?" "That depends. What kind of help are you asking for?" Kethvaros spread his hands. "Anything. Everything. We will accept any terms. We will pay any price. Just help us survive." "Any terms?" Elena's voice sharpened. "You would let us return as servants? As second-class citizens? As convenient workers to be used and discarded when you no longer need us?" "No." Kethvaros shook his head firmly. "Never again. We are not asking you to serve us. We are asking you to join us. As equals. As partners. As the people we should have treated you as from the beginning." Elena studied his face for a long moment. She was looking for deception, for hidden pride, for the old arrogance that had doomed the Concord. She found only exhaustion and genuine remorse. "The old Concord is dead," she said finally. "It cannot be saved. It should not be saved. A civilization built on hierarchy and exclusion deserves to fall." Kethvaros closed his eyes in despair. "But," Elena continued, "that does not mean nothing can be built in its place." His eyes snapped open. "If we return," Elena said, "it will not be to rebuild the old Concord. It will be to create something new. A true partnership between species, where no one is supreme and no one is expendable. A civilization built on the understanding that we need each other, that our differences are our strength, that pushing someone out because they are strange is the fastest way to destroy yourself." "Yes," Kethvaros said immediately. "Yes, we accept. Whatever you want, we accept. I am not finished. There will be no more expulsions. Ever. Any species that joins this new civilization joins it permanently. They can choose to leave, but they cannot be pushed out. That is the first rule." "Agreed. The ruling council will be reformed. Every species will have equal voice, including humanity. No triumvirate of elders. No hierarchy based on age or history. One species, one vote." "Agreed. And there will be a memorial." Every world in the new civilization will remember what happened here. The purity doctrine will be taught in every school. Children will learn what bigotry costs. This mistake will never be forgotten. Kethvaros bowed his head. Agreed. I will write the history myself. I will ensure that my name is remembered as the fool who nearly destroyed everything. Let my shame be a warning to all who come after. Elena was silent for a moment. Then, for the first time since the delegation arrived, she smiled. Then we have an agreement. The humans will return. Not as servants, not as guests, but as neighbors, because that is what we always were, and neighbors help each other. Kethvaros felt something he had not felt in 3 years. Hope. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you. We do not deserve this mercy. No, Elena agreed. You do not. But mercy is not about deserving. It is about choosing to help someone even when they have hurt you. That is what humans do. It is what we have always done. It is the thing you could never understand about us. She extended her hand. It was a human gesture, one that the Valeth had never adopted. Kethvaros looked at it with confusion. You take it, Elena explained. You hold it. It means we have made a promise to each other. Slowly, carefully, Kethvaros reached out and wrapped his crystalline fingers around her small, warm hand. A promise, he repeated. Yes, a promise. We will not break it again. See that you do not, because if you do, the humans will not return a third time. We will not be there to save you, and you will face the darkness alone. Kethvaros understood. This was their last chance. The Concord's last chance. The galaxy's last chance. They would not waste it. Outside the conference room, the stars burned with ancient light. Somewhere among them, a dying civilization was waiting to be reborn, and the people who would save it were the same people who had been cast out as worthless. History had a cruel sense of humor. But sometimes, cruelty became wisdom, and wisdom became hope. The reckoning was complete. Now the rebuilding could begin. 20 years had passed since the humans returned. The galaxy was different now. The old Concord was a memory, studied in schools and discussed in history books. In its place stood something new. The United Peoples of the Stars, a smaller civilization, yes. The collapse had claimed trillions of lives and destroyed countless worlds. But what remained was stronger, wiser, better. On the capital world of New Harmony, the Great Council Chamber stood as a symbol of that change. It was not grand or imposing like the old Concord halls. It was simple, practical, and designed so that every delegate could see every other delegate clearly. There were no elevated thrones, no special positions, just a circle of equals, working together. President Marcus Chen, the third human leader since the rebuilding began, opened the morning session with a simple greeting. Good morning, friends. Let us begin. Around the circle, representatives from 8 species answered in their own tongues. The Valeth clicked their crystals in acknowledgement. The Thesic hummed their approval. The Rethki splashed their hands in the ceremonial pools built into their seats. The Orani and Velthan, their ancient war now decades past, sat side by side in peace. It was ordinary. Routine. And that was the miracle. In the old Concord, every council meeting had been a battle. Species fought for advantage, schemed for power, and looked for ways to dominate their rivals. The humans had smoothed over the conflicts, but they had never solved them. The hatred had always been there, hidden beneath the surface. Now the hatred was gone, not because the species had suddenly learned to love each other, but because they had learned what hatred cost. They had watched their civilization burn. They had buried their dead. They had stared into the darkness and seen what awaited them if they did not change. That lesson had been written in blood. It would not be forgotten. After the council session ended, Marcus walked through the streets of New Harmony. The city was a strange and beautiful mix of architectures. Valeth crystal towers stood beside Thesic hive domes. Rethki water gardens flowed beneath Orani forest parks. Human buildings connected everything, serving as bridges and meeting places where different species could interact. That was still humanity's role. Not rulers, not servants. Bridges. Young beings of every species walked together through the streets. A Valeth child held hands with a human girl, their laughter mixing in the warm air. A Thesic student argued philosophy with a Rethki professor. An Orani merchant sold goods to a Velthan customer, both of them smiling at a joke Marcus could not hear. It was beautiful. And it was still fragile. 20 years was nothing in the life of a civilization. The wounds had not fully healed. Perhaps they never would. But every day, every small interaction, every friendship formed across species lines, was another thread in the tapestry of their new world. On the edge of the city, in a modest home that overlooked the sea, an old Valeth was dying. Kethvaros had lived longer than anyone expected. The synthetic elements that had once been unavailable were now produced in abundance, and the Valeth population was slowly recovering. But Kethvaros was ancient even by Valeth standards, and his time was finally ending. He had spent his final years teaching. Young Valeth came to him to learn about the old days, about the purity doctrine, about the collapse. He told them everything, hiding nothing. He showed them his mistakes and explained exactly how he had made them. His memoirs, The Cost of Purity, had become required reading across the civilization. Every student, of every species, learned about the foolish old arbiter who had nearly destroyed everything. Kethvaros considered it his greatest achievement. A human visitor came to see him in his final days. Marcus Chen had heard that the old Valeth was fading, and he wanted to pay his respects. He found Kethvaros on a balcony, watching the sun set over the water. The ancient crystal body was more cracked than solid now, held together by will alone. "Mr. President," Kethvaros said. His voice was barely a whisper. "You honor me with your presence." "The honor is mine," Marcus said. "I wanted to thank you." "Thank me. I am the one who caused all this suffering. Why would you thank me?" Marcus sat beside him and looked out at the sea. "Because you learned. Because you admitted your mistake. Because you spent the rest of your life teaching others so they would not repeat it. That takes courage. More courage than most beings ever show." Kethvaros was silent for a long moment. "I was a coward," he finally said. "I was afraid of change. I was afraid of losing what made my people special. I thought that pushing out the strange and the different would make us strong. Instead, it made us dead. You were not the only one. The whole Concord voted for the doctrine, but I led them to it. I gave them the words and the ideas. The guilt is mine." Marcus nodded. "Yes, it is. But guilt is only useful if it leads to action, and your actions saved millions of lives. The species that survived, the civilization we have now, exists because you were willing to admit you were wrong. That matters." Kethvaros turned his ancient eyes toward the human. "Do you truly believe that? After everything we did to your people?" "I believe in second chances. Most humans do. It is one of our strange qualities." The old Valeth made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Humans are very strange. That is what made you so valuable, and so threatening. We could not understand you. We could not predict you. We could not control you. So we tried to remove you. And you discovered that was worse. Much worse." Kethvaros closed his eyes. "I have one question, if you will answer it. In all the years since the return, I have never understood one thing. Ask, why did you come back? You had built your own civilization. You were thriving without us. You owed us nothing. We had hurt you terribly. Why did you choose to help the people who had cast you out?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "Because that is who we are," he said finally. "Humans define themselves by what they do for others. When we see someone in trouble, we help. When we see someone who is lost, we guide. When we see someone who has made a mistake, we give them a chance to fix it. It is not logical. It is not efficient. But it is human." He paused. "And honestly, we missed you. Not the Concord, not the hierarchy, not the politics. We missed our friends. Yulan, who risked everything to find us. The Rethki doctors who cried when they said goodbye. The Thesic workers who tried to learn human jokes. The Orani children who asked us why we could bend our fingers so far. We missed being part of something larger than ourselves." Kethvaros opened his eyes. They were wet with something that might have been tears, if Valeth could cry. "You are remarkable creatures," he whispered. "We should have seen it from the beginning. We should have treasured you instead of fearing you. You see it now. That is what matters." The sun touched the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. Kethvaros watched it with the eyes of someone seeing their last sunset. "Will you stay with me?" he asked. "I do not want to die alone." "Of course." And so the President of the United Peoples sat with the dying arbiter. Two old enemies made friends by tragedy. watching the darkness come. Kethvaros died that night, peacefully, surrounded by beings who had once been his victims and were now his family. Across the galaxy, the news spread. Vigils were held on every world. Beings of every species gathered to remember the foolish old Valeth who had nearly destroyed everything and then spent his remaining years trying to make it right. On New Harmony, a memorial was built in his name, not to honor him, but to remember him. A statue of the old arbiter, on his knees before Ambassador Vasquez, asking for forgiveness. Beneath it, words were carved in every language of the civilization. He was wrong. He learned. He taught others. Let his shame be our wisdom. And at the very bottom, a final inscription in human script. We are not your servants. We are not your saviors. We are your neighbors. And neighbors, help each other. 50 years after the expulsion, a young Valeth child stood in a classroom on New Harmony. Her teacher was a human, an old woman with kind eyes and patient hands. The child looked at the memorial outside the window. She had been born long after the collapse, in a world where humans were simply part of life. Teacher, she asked, why did the old Concord push the humans out? The teacher smiled sadly. They forgot that civilization is not about being the best. It is about bringing out the best in each other. They pushed us out because we were different, and then they learned that different was exactly what they needed. The child considered this. Then she said, that was foolish. Yes, the teacher agreed. It was. But wisdom often comes from foolishness survived. The important thing is that they learned, that we learned. Together, outside the window, ships of a dozen species moved through the sky. Children of every shape and color played in the streets. The galaxy was at peace. It would not last forever. Nothing does. But for now, in this moment, the united peoples of the stars stood together, united by the memory of what division had cost them. And at the center of it all, as they had always been, were the humans, not the strongest or the smartest, not the oldest or the most powerful, just the people who refused to stop caring, the people who built bridges instead of walls, the people who forgave the unforgivable and healed the unhealable, the people who made civilization possible. They had been pushed out, they had watched an empire crumble, and then they had returned to build something better. That was the human way. That was why the galaxy needed them. And that was why, in the end, even those who had hated them learned to love them. The stars burned on, ancient and eternal, and among them, life continued. Strange, different, and wonderfully imperfect. Together, the end.